This is why Superbreak was a mistake. Let's get into it.
Alright. Have you ever wondered why the newer age version of non-break units have such high multipliers in their kit compared to old ones? I mean, the obvious point to look at is power creep. You know, as the game progresses, if newer characters aren't stronger than the old ones, why would you roll for them? But in my opinion, the actual reason is that they need to compete with Superbreak. There's a few issues I have with this. The actual reason is that they need to compete.
Just doing an unbelievable amount of damage, like so much.
With Superbreak. There's a few issues I have with this mechanic, so let me just start with this. Superbreak is essentially free damage. All you have to do is build break effect, level your character up, break the enemy, and then you're good to go. There's no real worry about chasing specific pieces or leveling your talents or pretty much anything. You just do one thing, you hope your character has good toughness break efficiency, or use your on May because she buffs it, and that's it. It's easy. For the most part, you can ignore the break stat entirely because the supports that are used in Superbreak teams give so much of it through their talents and relic sets. There's no real build craft, and any unit can do it. There's Himiko Superbreak, where you don't have to change your relics at all from whatever set you threw on her for pure fiction.
Yeah, but you can just throw on a break effect one to make it better. That's what I did. I did a 2-piece Duke and 2-piece cavalry, or like thief set.
There's Superbreak Blade getting
Super Blade is
better clears at E0 than he does with a real crit build. Hell, I've even seen Fei Zhao Superbreak get clears, though I think those ones weren't as good as their normal playstyle.
It's just
in my opinion, it's honestly very similar to Dendro from Genshin. It's easy to access damage that doesn't require much of anything to actually work. In that game, the counterbalancing to Dendro started with Neuvillette, who's a crit DPS that they gave crazy strong multipliers, followed by Arlecchino and arguably Navia. Once Hoyo realized, hey, wait a minute, making a super broken non-Dendro DPS just made the game even easier than it was. The result is that now that we're in 5.x with Natlan's release, they've increased the HP of monsters in the Abyss by 50%.
I think Superbreak was... I think the start of balancing Superbreak was with Acheron, because she was like... had this, like, she has ignorant multipliers in my opinion. Like, her damage is just stupid. She trivialized the game. So I think that was kind of like as a precursor
compared to where it was in 4.8. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here, but what I'm seeing here is a pattern. Just like how Neuvillette released with crazy multipliers to...
Although I will say, when he said Dendro, I assume he was referring to Hyperbloom specifically, because that one you just want elemental mastery on your like your Hyperbloom detonator, where in this case you want a bunch of break effect on your DPS. So like you're just focusing on like one stat.
Counterbalance Dendro, you can see the start of this happening in
But it's arguably better because you can passively just do extra damage, like he said it's free.
The unit like Fei Zhao having a let me check here. Oh, right. 64% stronger ult based on multiplier alone than Sela.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
Something I think worth mentioning here is that even though Superbreak is already really strong, I don't actually think it's even reached its peak yet, which is kind of concerning. The reason I think that is because a lot of different mechanics that are introduced into Star Rail are generally testing grounds for a future character or a game mode change. The most recent example of this is the pure fiction changes that are coming in 2.7, where the grit mechanic from the recent 2.5 War Dance event is being added to it. Another example is the exo toughness bars on the current MOC, and well, if you know, you know.
Yes, we do. He's referring to Fugui, because Fugui passively gives exo toughness.
When those things do get added, it's only lowering the floor to that free damage even more than it already has been.
And they give away
I have a feeling HSR is going to go down the same path that Genshin has. And the problem I have with that
is it's only 2.x. It's not even, it's happening like a version ahead of Hyperbloom.
Is that nothing is ever actually free. We might not see it a ton right now. For example, the higher multipliers I mentioned is just one example that could be coincidental, but eventually Hoyo is going to get tired of forcing break as much as they have been, and it's the players that are going to feel the consequences of that. It might be something more simple like an HP pool increase like we got with Hule in 2.5, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's a good solution.
Goulet's annoying.
I'll touch on that later.
If I don't play like
Before I do, another thing that I want to talk about is what I briefly mentioned earlier, buildcraft. One of the things that I like about all the different stats in games like this is that the characters can scale off different things. I want to be clear with something here. I have zero problem with a character scaling off of a specific stat like break effect or HP or effect hit rate or
I like that too because it gives variety.
Whatever. I think that stuff is actually a good thing because it gives variety and it makes relic farming less of a pain because
what are the chances? Pre-watched. I totally pre-watched it, guys. Obviously. But no, that's absolutely correct. I like it, especially like Jiaocho and Black Swan scaling off effect hit rate. Really, really fun because, you know, all of those pieces that accidentally, oops, all effect hit rate. Now they're good because nobody really cared about effect hit rate unless there was like, you know, the like minor group of Kafka enjoyers who are base as fuck. And, you know, now Acheron enjoyers.
Because eventually there's going to be someone that can use a double crit piece that rolls 20% HP or something like that. The problem with Superbreak is that
you mean Blade?
It completely invalidates the break effect stat as something to scale off of for damage. Your double crit piece that rolled once into break isn't looked at as a, hey, Zoe really wants that anymore. It's instead looked at like, well, that sucks. It doesn't have as much break as my other piece, so...
I have one of those pieces on my Firefly. Like, it's almost exactly like this. I'm pretty sure it has flat attack and defense with effect res on my Firefly, who, when she's in her ult, she can't be interrupted. So, but she has like 25% break effect. So, he's not even wrong.
I guess I'll never use it. And sure, it's not to say that...
But that thing had 6 speed, though. That thing had 6 speed. How could you ignore that? I would honestly sacrifice the break effect for the speed. If I would find another piece that was like this.
Have as much break as my other piece, so I guess I'll never use it. And sure, it's not to say that Zui or Boot Hill couldn't still use that double crit piece, but it's just not the same as it was before Superbreak, where that stat had value as a damage modifier rather than a damage boost to a specific mechanic. I think it's actually really telling.
Also, I think that one piece with 25 break effect is more valuable on like Firefly or Rappa, who can do their own instance of Super Break, because then like it's excuse me, it's more consistent and it's like just an extra oomph. Because they're basically getting 2 instances of Super Break.
His Super Break teams are used more often than hypercarry teams with some.
But that's because he skills off break effect, right? Let me see. Doesn't he have something that like skills off break effect? Talent. No. Am I just lying again? Oh, yeah. Okay, no, he does. He does scale off break effect for his crit rate, crit damage. So, like, you do, and he has a bunch of break effect in his kit. So, he does want break effect. So, I feel like Super Break is his intended playstyle, regardless, but I'll let you cook.
Something like Branya. To go off on a bit of a side note here, I also think it's worth talking about early game. I don't know about you guys, but when I first started, it was a struggle. It felt like a challenge because the damage things were doing to us back then felt like a hell of a lot more than we could do back to them. We didn't have high attack and good crit ratios with speed tuning and all the great supports we have now. We just had our basic units like Preservation March and Dan Hang doing 50 damage per skill.
Actually done hung.
One of the options we had back then was regular break, and in my opinion it was good for the same reasons that Super Break is good now. It was accessible damage and another option that wasn't trying to scrounge together a crit set when all we had was 3 and 4 star gear.
Yeah, but if you're gonna do any break effect, you would put it on a physical unit like Luca or Clara, because bleed is like the best break effect in the game based on scaling and damage because it's based on
most people
health.
just went with crit anyway because a lot of people back then rolled for Sela and had access to the Herta store cone that gave a big head start to it, but break was always there as a lesser but still valuable option.
It reminds me of, from what I've heard about, like, physical teams in Genshin, where it's like, oh, you just build hyper carry for 1.x and then they immediately invalidate it and want you to build more, like, varied team comms, and everyone was mad because hyper carry wasn't the best team anymore.
Yeah. As we all progressed through the game and started getting better builds for our units, break effect became less important because your raw stats could carry your damage instead of the mechanic. Personally, I think that was really healthy for the game, as it offered early game variety while players...
You couldn't rely on break effect for meaningful damage unless it was specifically physical, in my opinion. Quantum was good. Imprison was only really viable with, like, Welt, in my opinion, just because he had an on-demand Imprison with his ult.
Just still figuring things out, and then when Zwei was added later and scaled off break effect, it brought the stat back into relevance with a unique build style for a character. Nowadays though, they literally give you the Harmony Trailblazer when you beat Cocolia.
I did not realize you got Harmony Trailblazer so early. That's crazy. Like, I knew you got it for free, but, like, I didn't realize that. No, that's... So you don't even have to worry about it. You can just half-ass a team and then just, like, oops, Superbreak.
And you're immediately then given access to Superbreak. The terrible crit builds that you have early game just don't matter anymore because now you can just build for break and get strong damage that way. Or, like I mentioned earlier, you can just build the units like normal and enjoy the free damage that Superbreak offers on top of it. Most people don't have great supports earlier on in their playthrough, so having someone that gives access to a super strong mechanic like that completely changes the landscape of the early game.
Which is why part of me is tempted for when I pull Fugui on my alt account to just replace Silverwolf or Pella on my Acheron team, because she's a Nihility unit that gives debuffs and she gives access to Super Break, which would allow me to deal more damage with my Acheron and allow for faster clears, because then I could basically have two Super Break teams, because I would have Super Acheron and I'd have Firefly with Harmony Trailblazer.
Personally, I don't consider that to be a good thing because
which is kind of fucking sad. I think that's, and I do agree. It's like, oh, I'm struggling with Acheron, Pella, Silverwolf. Should I work on relics, or do I just make everyone fast, put break effect on them, and just make super break? Like, it's like almost like the brain rot strategy, and I can see why people had a problem with Hyper Bloom, because it's the same thing.
Completely disincentivizes new players from learning actual game mechanics other than just break the enemy and I win. And it's way too easy to use.
That's literally the mindset I have with putting Fugui on Acheron. It's just break enemy, go bear.
For the damage that it offers. Considering how easy the game is otherwise, I don't think something making it even easier is something to really be that happy about. All this said, there are some mechanics in the game that they can lean into to counteract Super Break. They could add in more enemies like Sam and the Penacony Soda Monkey who don't always have a breakable toughness bar, or they could go down the route of giving enemies shields like Argenti's Totems or the Streetlight Robot from Belobog.
I would prefer that one over the, just making it impossible to break.
Both of those things.
Also, why does this guy have 4 sustains? I just noticed that. Kind of cringe, but I'm assuming this is simulated universe, so I respect it.
Stop you from breaking the enemy and therefore dealing super break damage. But here's the thing, if that's the counter to super break, you also have to consider how that affects non-break teams, right? Like, imagine you're playing Fei Zhao and you stack up her ult, and then the enemy decides to put up a barrier just before you want to use it. You don't have to burn an entire ult on basically nothing, or save the ult and then overstack her ult counter.
Yeah, but it goes up to 12, so it doesn't matter. Like, if you think about it, it's like, oh no, you're getting like half a stack.
Another example is the imprison mechanic. What if there's a hypercarry unit that gets released that deals more damage to imprisoned enemies, but...
Welt would go crazy. That's why I'm like passively working on my Welt.
You can't imprison the enemy you're fighting because they don't let you break their bar, like when you're fighting something like Sam.
Yeah, but you can imprison them with Welt. Welt ignores that, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, correct me on that. He just imprisons the enemy. Actually, you know what? Let me pull it up, because... Oh, shit, okay. Right. Yeah, so he can just imprison people on demand. So just build break effect, energy regen, speed, so that you can constantly, like as much as possible, have his ult at the ready, so you can just imprison them. So that's how you would alleviate that. I would love for a character to want imprisonment, because that would give Welt a very, very strong niche. Like that would give him the perfect team, because that's what he does. He just slows the enemy and imprisons them. So he just stalls the enemy. And there's not really a place for him right now, because like you'd have to make him a main DPS, and I don't think he's main DPS worthy. As much as I love him, he is my favorite standard banner character, one of my favorite characters in the game for that matter, but anyways.
The toughness bar and shield mechanics seem like simple solutions, but this ties into what I mentioned earlier in terms of consequences that the players will feel. These simple counters to Superbreak will also be super unfun mechanics to deal with for non-break teams, and also
I would say they're annoying, but not unfun. I guess annoying isn't fun. So no, never mind. I agree.
So essentially deny the viability of other unit archetypes. That said, I do think there are options that they have that aren't so obtrusive to the other damage types, and here's a few of my ideas. One thing that I think they could do is change the buffs that are given by endgame content so that they're more potent towards specific archetypes, as well as they could either adjust or introduce new enemies to counteract break specifically.
Aren't they doing that though? It's just right now the like main team types are hyper carry, follow-up attack, dot, and super break, or like break effect. So like you have those teams that you can, those are the 4 teams that you have access to. So you would just have to take break effect, take the super break buffs out, and put in like hyper carry.
Personally, I like the second option a little bit less, so let's talk about that one first. An easy way that I think Superbreak's potency could be lowered is if new enemies are introduced that have detriments if you do break-related damage to them.
This I would like. Oh no, I agree. I agree. I'm just saying that specifically would give him a niche that people would build him for. Because like, unfortunately, the reality is anywhere you can put Welt, you can put another unit that does what you want him to do, but better. Like when I had him in my Acheron team, it was cope, really. If I'm going to be honest, I hate saying that, but it was just cope. Just, I have E6 S1 Acheron, just throw Pella, Sparkle, call it a day. No, I agree. I'm trying to think. We don't have anything, because literally the first imaginary DPS I can think of that isn't Rappa is Dan Heng in Bairu Lune, which literally is he got basically a support specifically for him in Sparkle.
For example, they could introduce an enemy that applies debuffs or counterattacks you when you deal break damage, kind of like
so just make clear
the Guardian Shadow from Belobog. Or they could give certain enemies a % chance to resist breaking whenever you attack them. Those are just a couple things that I thought of, but I'm sure there's a lot of options Hoyo has if they wanted to make enemies to do that. I just hope that the ones that they might choose don't end up being super annoying to non-break teams. Like I mentioned, I actually like the idea of catering endgame buffs towards specific damage niches a bit more, so let's now talk about that. If they decided to go this route and change the buffs offered in endgame modes, I think the way to do it is by making each buff heavily incentivize one playstyle.
Oh yeah, that's right. I completely forget about Ratio. Man, I don't like that character. I just pretend I just actually don't think he exists.
Without doing anything to discourage the other types. Here's a hypothetical example. Let's say you have a unit that wants a lot of crit rate like Fei Zhao. They also happen to use a lot of skill points, so they enjoy Sparkle for that, and if you have Sparkle's Light Cone, then you can get some crit rate from that too. When you're choosing your sustain, you decide to go for Fu Zhuan for the crit rate that she provides. That hypothetical unit is going to end up with a ton of crit rate, and depending on your relic situation, might even end up over-capping on crit rate. So, what if the endgame buff for one rotation of MOC is that any crit rate you have past 100 gives you a chance to crit a second time?
Oh, for Rappa, I should have explained this. I was excluding Rappa mainly because I was trying to think of a like DPS that isn't Superbreak. Because Rappa, why would you play her in like anything other than Superbreak? Because that's all she wants to be in.
Dealing extra damage. Now your extra crit rate isn't wasted, and you're heavily incentivized to use a crit DPS for that rotation of MOC rather than something like Superbreak. That said, just because you're incentivized to use a crit DPS for that rotation of MOC doesn't mean you're disincentivized from using something else. You can still use Superbreak or Follow Up or Dot if you want. It's just that one MOC is favored to something else apart from it. See, I honestly don't know if I've...
Which is why Firefly is so beloved and everyone likes her, is because it doesn't matter what the enemy is weak to, because she implants fire. Same thing with Boot Hill. But Firefly is just, for Superbreak, it's, like you just bring Firefly. That's what I do. If something isn't weak to fire and the other side is weak to lightning, I just put Firefly on the other side, and then so that way my Acheron can be on my, and this is for my alt account, by the way, Acheron on the lightning one.
The problem with Superbreak as a concept, and I certainly don't think directly nerfing the damage niche is a good idea. It's in the game at this point, and it's going to be something that we have to deal with from now on regardless of how Hoyo decides to balance.
I'm pretty sure they can't nerf it for legal reasons. I could be wrong on that. I don't know how that is. But I know they did give people, they did give a 10 pull to everyone for playing, or because they tried nerfing Nouvelette, but then they had to put it back.
I just think that I have a problem with it due to its ease of access and the ability to use it in pretty much any game mode without any downsides whatsoever.
I think that's what makes it good, but it's just the fact that it's so strong.
In the current landscape of the game, I don't even think there's anything that's bad for it, which makes it feel that much more oppressive as a damage type.
Because they're trying to sell all the Superbreak characters before they just completely make them irrelevant. I feel like Superbreak is going to be one of those that after 2.x, they're not going to make any break effect focused buffs for MOC, Pure Fiction, Apocalyptic Shadow going forward, or at least very seldomly they will. But I think that's why they're pumping it out and they're making it seem really, 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 really good before it just falls off.
Hopefully in the future, Hoyo takes a look at all this and realizes that there needs to be a leveling of the playing field. I just really hope that it's not at the cost of something like an HP increase that Genshin got, or annoying mechanics like giving a bunch of enemies shields and whatnot that affects damage niches outside of Superbreak. What do you think? Do you view Superbreak as a problem, and if so, what would you do to bring it more in line with other damage niches? Even if you're okay with where Superbreak is at the moment, feel free to let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments below.
Okay, so I think Superbreak, I do agree that it's like building for specifically Superbreak is like a really strong and like overpowered thing. But I think when he said that it's just passive damage regardless, I think that kind of, it makes it too easy in the beginning of the game, because it basically just exaggerating, but it doubles your damage for free. So I think that's bad because it just makes you feel like your team is stronger than what it is. So I think you do need to struggle until you get to like the end game, because you need to be aware of your team's strength. And that's kind of the problem I'm running into with Acheron, is my Acheron can breeze through all like the story game content and all like Divergent Universe and all that stuff. But as soon as I get to like the last 2 or 3, like the last 2 stages of Pure Fiction, Apocalyptic Shadow, and MOC, she really struggles because she just dies. She's too squishy, and that's never really a problem because she just puts out so much damage that it's like just it doesn't matter
anyway,
if they're squishy.
That's my rant. As always, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe.
Which is why I'm tempted to try and get Aventurine on my alt account and Fugwe, but like we'll have to wait and see.
Haven't already? Maybe give my other videos a shot too.
Ooh, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this. I'm subbed already, so we're gonna link the video real quick for you guys. Definitely give him a sub. I think great fucking content, a great video. He's only at 1.08. I say only, but like, you know, sub to me too, guys. Help a homie out.